Alrighty, here's the continuance from a few days ago because I am a goober and I didn't. Yeah. Chapter 7 Reverse Psychology. George and Harold passed out the Friday memo and made it back to their classroom just in time for Ms. Ribble's retirement party. George quickly changed the letters around on the sign outside the door while Harold wrote a special greeting on Mr. Krupp's card and stuffed it into the envelope. Ms. Ribble really needs a practice. "Hey, Bubs!" shouted Mr. Krupp as he stormed down the hall. "What do you think you're doing? What do you kids think you're doing?" "We're going to Miss Ribble's retirement party," said George. "That's what you think, smart guy," said Mr. Krupp. Miss Ribble showed me that comic book you boys made out her, and now I catch you changing the letters around on another sign. You boys aren't going to any party. You're going straight to the detention room." "Well, fine," said Harold. "Then we're not going to give Miss Ribble that card our class made for her." Mr. Krupp quickly snatched the card out of Harold's hand. "Aha!" he shouted. "I'm going to make sure she gets this card. I'm going to give it to her myself." "Aw, man," said Harold. George and Harold walked down the hall toward the detention room. "Wow," said George. "That was pretty cool how you got Mr. Krupp to deliver that phony card for you." "Yep," said Harold. "I used reverse psychology on him." "I gotta try that sometime," said George. "By the way, what did you write on that card?" "You'll see," said Harold, smiling. Chapter 8 The Party. Miss Ribble's retirement party started off bad and just got worse. First, Miss Ribble forced the class to sing a corny song to her. By the time she was done yelling at the boys for singing off key, the chunky tofu ice cream was melted. Everybody had to eat it anyway. Then the children handed in their happy retirement cards. Miss Ribble ripped several of the cards up because some of the children had mistakenly drawn polka dots on their butterflies. One unfortunate boy had also drawn a happy, smiling sunshine on his card, and he had to stand in the corner. Finally, Mr. Krupp stepped forward and handed Ms. Ribble the card he had snatched from Harold's hand. "I went to a lot of trouble to get this for you," Mr. Krupp said gallantly. Miss Ribble tore the envelope open and read the card out loud. "You're one hot mama," said Miss Ribble, with a shocked look on her face. "Ew," cried the children. She opened the card and read the inside. "Will you marry me? Sign Mr. Krupp." "Ew," cried the children. The teachers gasped. Then the room grew silent. Miss Ribble glared over at Mr. Krupp, who had turned bright red and began sweating profusely. He tried to speak. He tried to tell her it was all a big mistake. He tried to say something, but all that came out was or congratulations, said Mr. Meaner as he patted Mr. Krupp's sweaty, shivering shoulder. "Yes, congratulations," shouted the Santa. "This will be the best party in the whole world. You can have it here at the school a week from Saturday. I'll plan everything. You lovebirds won't have to worry about a thing." Great. Thanks," said Miss Ribble, still looking quite angry and confused. What? said Mr. Krupp. Chapter 9 Freaky Weeky. The following week at Jerome Horvitz Elementary School was definitely one of the weirdest ones they'd had in a while. For example, none of the kids showed up for school on Monday, but Mr. Krupp hadn't even seemed to notice. "Hey, where is everybody today?" asked Mr. Rected. "Haba, haba, haba, wah," said Mr. Krupp. On Tuesday, everybody did show up in their pajamas. "Why is everybody picking their noses?" asked Miss Fit. "Haba, haba, 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 wah," said Mr. Krupp. On Wednesday, for some strange reason, the whole school smelled like garlic and rotten egg salad sandwiches, especially some of the girls. "Boy," said Miss Guided, "these styles today sure are getting bizarre." "Hama, hama, hama, wah," said Mr. Krupp. Thursday was without a doubt a complete and total disaster. "There's a food fight in the lunchroom," shouted Mr. Rustworthy, "and the football team is destroying the teacher's lounge." "Hammer, hammer, hammer, wah," said Mr. Krupp. Now, nobody was sure what happened on Friday. Apparently, there was a mix-up with the dress code and the yearbook photos. "Our school pictures are ruined," shouted Miss Dakin. "Mama, mama, 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 wah, wah," said Mr. Krupp. Yes, it was a freaky week, all right. But the big wedding was only a day away, and things were about to get really freaky. It was Saturday, the day of the big wedding. Miss Santhrop, true to her word, had taken care of everything. In just 1 week, she had transformed the gymnasium into a beautiful wedding hall, complete with food, decorations, and even a 6-foot tall ice sculpture. All the children were dressed in their finest clothes. Harold even wore a tie. "Man," said George, "I can't believe we had to go to school on a Saturday." "I know," said Harold. "Why couldn't they have had this wedding during Monday's math test?" Soon the organist began to play. The rabbi walked down the aisle. He approached George and Harold and stopped to talk to the boys. "I've heard a lot about you two," said the rabbi, "and I don't want you boys playing any of your tricks today." "Silly rabbi," said George. "Tricks are for kids." Believe it or not, George and Harold had not planned any pranks for the wedding. They had no joy buzzards up their sleeves, no squirting flowers in their lapels, and no whoopee cushions on their chairs. They were on their best behavior. Nothing could go wrong today. In no time at all, Ms. Ribble and Mr. Krupp were standing in front of the rabbi, looking quite ill. The rabbi asked Mr. Krupp if he would take Ms. Ribble to be his lawfully wedded wife. "Rabbi, rabbi, 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 wah," said Mr. Krupp. Then the rabbi asked Miss Ribble if she would take Mr. Krupp to be her husband. There was a long silence. Everyone leaned forward. Ms. Ribble looked nervously from side to side. Suddenly, she shouted at the top of her lungs, "No!" Miss Ribble turned to Mr. Krupp and jabbed her finger into his shoulder. Listen, Mr. Krupp. Listen, Krupp," she said. "I can't marry you." "Hooray! That's too bad," said Mr. Krupp. "You're a mean, cruel, and vicious man," said Miss Ribble. "I can respect that. It's just." "Just what?" asked Mr. Krupp. "It's your nose," said Miss Ribble. "You've got the most ridiculous nose I've ever seen in my life. I just couldn't marry somebody with such a silly nose." "Oh, you foolin' lady." Mr. Krupp got angry. Well, fine. Well, fine. He shouted, I didn't want to marry you. Anyway, it was all George and Harold's fault. They tricked us. Suddenly, everybody in the gymnasium turned and looked at George and Harold. Time to go, said George. As George and Harold turned to leave the gymnasium, they heard the loud thumps of cleated wedding boots clomping down the aisle toward them. I'm gonna cry those cats at the high cheese! Screamed Miss Ribble as she lunged for the two boys. George and Harold screamed and ran to the back of the room near the refreshments. There they hid behind two large wooden pillars. Miss Ribble approached the pillars and grasped them with her mighty hands. With a horrible roar, she pushed the right pillar over, landed on the back of the luncheon table, causing the front of the table to flip high into the air. Unfortunately, this sent all the food flying into the crowd. The creamy candied carrots clobbered the kindergartners. The fatty fried fish fritters flipped into the first graders. The sweet and sour spaghetti squash splattered the second graders. The 3,000 thawing thimbleberries thudded the third graders. 500 frosted fudgy fruitcakes flogged the fourth graders. And 55 fistfuls of fancy French fried frankenfurters flattened the fifth graders. By now, you're probably worried that the wedding guests had nothing to drink with their lovely appetizers. Well, rest assured, the second pillar took care of that. Ms. Ribble pushed the left pillar into the fresh fruit display, causing it to topple over, sending two large watermelons crushing down into the two oversized punch bowls. This created two enormous splashes of tropical fruit-flavored punch, which rained down upon the wedding guests like a torrential downpour. Now, no wedding is complete without a wedding cake. And when Miss Ribble kicked the ice sculpture over, the resulting crash sent the beautiful double-decker cake flipping high into the air right over Miss Ribble's head. I've got you now! Screamed Miss Ribble as she grabbed George and Harold by their neckties. Splat! George and Harold undid their ties and ran out of the gymnasium screaming. Man, cried Harold, I thought we were dead meat. That's what we get for going to school on a Saturday, said George. Chapter 12. Miss Ribble's Revenge. As you might imagine, George and Harold were nervous about going back to class on Monday, but for some strange reason, Miss Ribble seemed happy to see them. Good morning, boys, Miss Ribble chirped with the giant, evil, toothy grin. Come here, I've got something to show you. Uh-oh, said George. She's smiling. That can't be a good sign. George and Harold cautiously approached Miss Ribble's desk. I took the liberty of adjusting your grades the past weekend. You'll be happy to know that all your grades have just been dropped from B's and C's to F's and G's. Oh no! George gasped. Not F's and G's. Hey, what's a G? That's the only grade lower than an F, said Miss Ribble. There's no such grade as a G, said Harold. There is now, said Miss Ribble. Looks like you're both going to flip the fourth grade. Won't that be fun? No way, said George. That's unfair. Life ain't fair, said Miss Ribble. Get used to it. Chapter 13. A bad idea. That afternoon, George and Harold sat in their treehouse, feeling sorry for themselves. She can't get away with that, said George. We got to tell somebody about this. Nobody's going to believe us, said Harold. Well, then, there is one thing we can do, said George. He opened the drawer to their drawing table and searched through the pennies, paper clips, and dried spitballs and rubber bands. Then he pulled out a dusty plastic ring with some gum stuck on it. It was the 3D Hypno ring. Oh no, said Harold. I thought we threw that thing away. We just threw the instructions away. But I remember how it works. Do you remember what happened the last time we used it? Asked Harold. Yeah, said George, but we were fooling around last time. This time we'll be serious. We won't make any mistakes. All we have to do is hypnotize her into changing our grades back to normal. That's all. I don't know. It sounds like a bad idea to me. Worse than flunking the 4th grade? Asked George. Good point, said Harold. And that's all I'm going to be reading for today. And I promise sometime soon I'll read the rest.